On a freezing night in Buffalo, the snow was so thick it swallowed the streetlights. Nolan Pierce, a former Navy SEAL, thought he was just stopping for coffee. Then two German Shepherd puppies stumbled out of the darkness, shaking so hard their paws could barely hold them up. The puppies did not bark. The puppies did not run. The puppies grabbed the edge of Nolan Pierce's coat and pulled, begging for one thing: help. Nolan Pierce followed the puppy tracks behind the river warehouses, with Coda staying silent at his side. A weak security light flickered over bare trees, and the wind cut like a blade. Then Nolan Pierce saw it, a mother German Shepherd hanging from a low branch, swaying in the snow like someone tried to erase her without a sound. And the puppies stood beneath that tree, staring up as if the world had told them to be quiet. Nolan Pierce refused, because some evil only survives when good people stay silent. And what Nolan Pierce uncovered behind that warehouse was bigger than one cruel act. If this story hits your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Comment "I won't stay quiet" below, and subscribe for more powerful stories of love, faith, and justice. Break time 03. Footprints in the snow. Snow came down in thin, stubborn sheets over Buffalo, turning streetlights into pale halos. Wind off the river pushed cold through every seam, and the city's empty warehouses hunched like dark animals along the water. Nolan Pierce kept both hands on the wheel, not because the road was hard to read, but because it gave his mind something simple to obey. The heater in his truck worked. It always did. Still, the cold found him in small places, in the old ache behind his left knee, in the tightness at the base of his skull when a siren wailed far away. Beside him, Coda sat upright, calm as a statue, a black and tan German Shepherd with amber-brown eyes that missed nothing. Nolan did not need barking to know what the dog thought. Coda's attention was a quiet language. Tonight, that language felt sharper than usual. Nolan pulled into a gas station that looked like it had survived purely out of stubbornness. One pump was wrapped in yellow tape. The convenience store sign flickered like it could not decide if it wanted to be alive. Nolan parked under the brightest light, as if brightness could count as safety. The bell above the door gave a tired jingle when he stepped inside. Warm air and the smell of coffee hit him at once. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 50s, medium height, stocky build, with gray hair pressed flat under a navy beanie. His name tag read Ray. Ray's face had that look people got after too many night shifts, like sleep was a rumor they used to believe in. Ray glanced at Nolan's broad shoulders, then at the calm dog near the door. His eyes softened just a little. "That your service dog?" Ray asked. "Coda," Nolan said. His voice was steady and low. "He keeps me honest." Ray gave a short smile that did not quite reach his eyes. City's got a way of testing that. Nolan bought coffee he did not want, and a protein bar he knew he would not finish. Habit, something to do with his hands. When he turned back toward the door, Coda's ears lifted higher. Not fear, focus. Outside, the wind tugged at Nolan's coat the moment he stepped through the doorway. He wore the same outfit he always wore in winter, a navy parka that fell to mid-thigh, a red and black plaid flannel underneath, faded jeans, brown leather boots that had been through too many slushy parking lots. He looked like a man who did not chase attention and did not want to be chased. Coda moved close, not crowding Nolan's leg, just aligning with him. Nolan followed the dog's gaze across the lot. At first, he saw nothing but drifting snow and the hard shine of ice. Then something small moved near the shadow line by a trash bin, a low shape, a stumble. Another. 2 puppies. They were German Shepherd pups, black and tan like Coda but smaller than Nolan's boots, their bodies too thin for the cold they were standing in. One pup had a braver posture, ears half lifted and eyes wide with urgency. The other stayed closer to the shadows, trembling, blinking snow out of round eyes as if the world was too bright and too loud. The braver pup started toward Nolan, then stopped, then started again. It made no sound. It did not bark. It looked up at him with a stare that felt too direct for something so young. The shy pup hovered behind, watching, ready to bolt. Coda took one step forward and froze. A guard dog would have lunged. Coda did not. His tail stayed neutral, his head dipped slightly, as if telling the pups, "I see you." Nolan crouched slowly, careful with his knee, careful with the space between fear and trust. "Hey," he said, as if speaking softly could warm the air. "You're going to freeze out here." The braver pup closed the distance, then did something Nolan did not expect. It pressed its small body against Nolan's boot and pawed at the edge of his coat, tugging once. Not play, not begging for food. Direction. The shy pup did the same, but from a safer angle. One quick touch, then it backed away. Eyes locked on Nolan's face like it needed permission to hope. Nolan felt the familiar argument rise in his head. Don't get pulled into a mess. You do not know the people attached to these dogs. You do not know the rules of this street. Then another thought came, quieter but heavier. You do know what it is to be left out in the cold. He looked at Coda. The dog's eyes were steady, not pleading, not panicked, just sure. "All right," Nolan murmured. "Show me." The braver pup turned and started across the lot, quick and awkward, slipping once on ice but recovering with stubborn pride. The shy pup followed, keeping its body close to the brave one like a shadow that did not want to be separated. Nolan stood and followed at a measured pace. He did not rush. Rushing was how you missed things. He scanned the street beyond the station. One car passed, slow, then disappeared into the snowfall. The rest of the world looked empty, but Nolan knew better than to believe in empty. The puppies led him past the far edge of the gas station, toward a service road that ran behind the property. The light from the station thinned out there, swallowed by falling snow. The river wind came harder, carrying a smell Nolan could not place at first. Rust, wet wood, old metal. Coda moved slightly ahead now, not pulling, just taking point. Nolan tracked what he could see. Fresh paw prints, smaller human footprints. 2. Tire tracks that were not from the gas station's plows. They cut toward the warehouses by the water. Nolan's chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. This was the edge of a story, the part where people decided to look away because it was easier. The braver pup circled back to Nolan again and tugged at his coat once more. More urgent now. The shy pup made a small sound, almost swallowed by the wind. Not a bark, more like a breath that could not become a voice. Nolan swallowed, tasting cold air and old memories. He reached into his coat pocket and wrapped his fingers around his phone. Not calling yet. He did not want to announce himself to someone hiding nearby. "Easy," he whispered, mostly to himself. "We do this the right way." The puppies turned toward the dark shapes of the warehouses, and Nolan followed, the snow thickening around them like a curtain being drawn. Behind him, the gas station lights flickered again, as if the last safe place in the area was thinking about giving up. The tree behind the warehouse. The wind thickened into a hard, steady shove as Nolan moved deeper toward the river. Snow hissed across frozen gravel, and the warehouses rose ahead like blunt shapes that had forgotten what they were built for. The gas station's last flicker died behind him, swallowed by distance and weather. Nolan Pierce kept his pace measured, his breath controlled. The navy parka pulled tight across his shoulders. Under it, the red and black plaid flannel sat like a second skin, familiar and stubborn. Faded jeans, brown, low-cut boots, a uniform of a man who did not chase trouble, but did not run from it either. His left knee complained on every uneven patch of ice. It always did when the cold got mean. Nolan hated that it could still reach him so easily, like a hand from an old life grabbing his leg and saying, "Remember." Coda moved slightly ahead, not pulling, not darting, just guiding. A disciplined German shepherd, black and tan, ears upright, amber-brown eyes scanning the dark with quiet intelligence. Nolan called him a service dog because that was the simplest label the world understood. The truth was more complicated. Coda did not simply serve. He watched. He judged. He stayed. Ash and Ember, the 2 puppies, were struggling now. Their bodies were made for warmth and play, not river wind and midnight snow. Ash kept forcing himself forward, slipping and catching himself with those oversized paws. Ember stayed close, her small body tight with fear, eyes wide and shining, as if the night itself might reach down and grab her. Nolan's mind kept trying to build an exit plan. He noted the service road, The broken chain-link fence, the lack of fresh tracks from any normal foot traffic, tire marks cut toward the warehouses, deep enough to be recent, not a snowplow, something heavier, and not local to the gas station. He wanted to call someone. He also knew the shape of a trap, sound carried in cold air. A ringing phone could announce him like a flare. "Easy," he whispered, not sure if he was talking to the puppies or to the part of himself that wanted to sprint. Ash veered toward the back of the nearest warehouse, where the building's shadow thickened into something almost solid. Ember followed, then stopped and looked back at Nolan, as if to make sure he was still choosing them. Nolan followed. Behind the warehouse, the world changed. The wind came in cleaner, colder. Straight off the open river, a small stand of trees huddled back there. Thin trunks and bare branches like fingers. Snow clung to the bark in streaks. Ash ran toward the trees, then circled, then bolted again, frantic but purposeful. Ember made a small sound that barely rose above the wind. Not a bark, more like a plea that did not know how to become one. Coda stopped dead. In the dim light from a distant security lamp, Nolan saw it. A rope, a low branch, a dark shape hanging where nothing living should hang. For a second, Nolan's brain rejected it, the way it did with any scene that threatened to break the rules of what a person could do to another breathing thing. Then his eyes adjusted. The shape was a dog, a German shepherd, black and tan, her body limp with exhaustion, her fur dusted with snow as if the storm had tried to cover her up. The mother. Nolan felt something hot and bright rise behind his ribs. Not panic, not shock. Anger, sharp enough to cut. He could hear his own pulse, steady and wrong in his ears. He forced himself to slow down. Speed could make him clumsy. Clumsiness could cost her. He moved under the branch, planted his boots wide for balance, and lifted her carefully, taking the weight so the rope stopped pulling. Her body was cold, but not stiff. Her eyes fluttered, then tried to focus. There was no fight left in her, only a tired will to stay awake, as if she had been holding herself to the world by a thread. Nolan's fingers worked fast. He pulled a small utility knife from his pocket, the kind he carried because a man who had lived through chaos learned to keep tools close. He slid the blade under the rope and cut in one clean motion. The rope snapped away. The mother dog sagged into Nolan's arms. He lowered her to the snow with control, laying his parka open beneath her like a shield. He pressed a hand to her side, feeling for breath, for rhythm, shallow. But there, he rubbed warmth back into her chest with steady pressure, not frantic, just firm and sure. Ash and Ember crawled toward her at once, their small bodies trembling as they pressed against her neck and shoulder. The mother's eyes shifted, something softened, a faint movement of her muzzle, like she was trying to tell them she was still here. Nolan swallowed hard. He did not pray often, not in words, but in that moment. He wanted the universe to stop being cruel for 5 minutes, just 5. Coda stood watch, head angled toward the warehouse, ears tuned to any footstep, any door squeal, any engine turning over. Nolan loved him for that, for being calm when the world tried to be ugly. Nolan scanned the area without lifting his hands from the mother dog. A scuffed patch in the snow, a cigarette butt, a fresh boot print near the tree that did not belong to him. Someone had been back here recently. Someone had looked at this and walked away, or worse, had done it and left. The thought landed in him like a stone. He gathered the mother dog gently, shifting her weight against his chest. She did not resist. Her body simply accepted help as if she had stopped believing help would come. "Stay close," he murmured to the puppies. "You two ride." 2. Ash tried to climb up first, stubborn as a soldier. Ember followed. Careful and quiet, Nolan opened the truck door, lifted the mother onto the back seat, and tucked the pups beside her. He kept his parka around them as best he could, then turned the heat full blast. Coda hopped in last, settling with his eyes still on the dark, like he expected it to move. Nolan drove without hesitation, but not recklessly. He took the route with the most light, the least isolation. His mind kept replaying the rope against the branch, not as a horror, but as a message. Someone wanted her silent. At the clinic, the sign said, "Morgan Animal Care," and the front window glowed with a tired kind of warmth. Nolan parked close to the door. He leaned in and spoke softly to the mother dog. "You made it," he said. "Now let me do the rest." Inside, the smell of disinfectant and warm air hit him. A woman stepped out from behind the counter, moving quickly, like someone used to emergencies. She was in her early 30s, average height, slim to average build, brown hair pulled into a practical bun. Her eyes were clear and sharp, but there were tired shadows under them that told Nolan she worked too hard and slept too little. "Tessa Morgan," Nolan asked. "That's me," she said, already looking past him to the bundle in his arms. Her voice was calm, but her posture tightened. She had the kind of compassion that did not waste time on theatrics. "What happened?" she asked. Nolan met her eyes. He kept his voice steady, because if he let anger leak out, it would flood the room. "I found her behind a warehouse," he said, "hanging from a tree. 2 puppies led me to her." Tessa's face changed, not into surprise, exactly, into recognition, like she had feared this kind of call would come again. "Bring her in," she said. Now, as Nolan laid the mother dog on the exam table, Tessa's hands moved with skill and gentleness. She checked pulse, temperature, breathing. She spoke to the dog in a soft voice that did not pity. It promised effort. Nolan watched, feeling the familiar weight settle in his chest. This was not just cold and bad luck. The rope had been tied by a human mind. Tessa glanced up at him. "Did you call the police?" Nolan thought of the boot print by the tree, the tire tracks, the way the warehouse area felt watched. "Not yet," he said. Tessa nodded once. Slow. "That might be wise," she said quietly. "Not everyone who wears a badge wants the same thing you want." Nolan looked down at the puppies pressed against their mother's side, their tiny bodies finally still. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we do this the right way." And in the warmth of that small clinic, with the storm clawing at the windows, Nolan realized something that made his throat tighten. He had followed 2 frightened puppies into the dark. Now he was going to have to walk them back out. A charity with 2 clean hands. Morning arrived like it was ashamed to be seen. Snow still fell, softer now, laying a clean sheet over the night's tracks, as if the city wanted to pretend nothing happened behind the warehouses. Nolan Pierce sat in the clinic's small waiting room, with a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold twice. He did not drink it. He held it because his hands needed something to do besides shake. Not from fear. From a controlled kind of rage that had nowhere polite to go. His navy winter parka stayed on, unzipped just enough to show the red and black plaid flannel beneath. Faded jeans. Brown, low-cut boots planted flat on the tile. He kept his posture quiet, shoulders squared, his left knee stiff when he shifted. The injury did not hurt as much as the memory of being helpless did. Coda lay at his feet, head up, ears forward, eyes tracking every sound in the hallway. Black and tan coat, amber brown eyes. A service dog, in the simplest terms, in the truest terms. Nolan's tether to reality. Coda's calm kept Nolan from becoming the kind of man who solved problems with his fists first. A door opened. Tessa Morgan stepped out, peeling off gloves. In daylight, she looked younger, but the exhaustion remained, tucked under her eyes like bruises. Her brown hair was still tied tight, her scrubs wrinkled at the knees from kneeling by Luna's table all night. "She's stable," Tessa said, voice low, cold, weak, but stable. "She ate a little. That's a good sign." Nolan let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. "And the puppies?" "Sleeping," Tessa said, and for a moment her expression softened. Then it sharpened again, because she had seen enough hurt in her life to know softness needed protection. "They don't leave her side." Nolan nodded once. He wanted to go in, to see Luna's eyes open, to be sure she was real and not something the storm had invented to test him. But Tessa's look stopped him. "We need to talk," she said. She led him to a cramped office that smelled like antiseptic and old paper. A bulletin board held flyers for lost cats, low-cost vaccines, and one handwritten sign that said, "Please be kind to our staff." The kindness part made Nolan's throat tighten. Tessa sat, then turned her monitor toward him. "I've seen this before," she said, careful with the words, like the truth might break if she dropped it too hard. "Not the tree," she paused, and Nolan felt his jaw tighten. "But the pattern." Dogs come in half dead. No collar, no chip, same kind of stress, same kind of dehydration. And then, they vanish, Nolan asked. Tessa's eyes flicked up. People show up claiming to be from a rescue, she said. They have clean paperwork. They sound compassionate. They say the dogs will be transported to better facilities. Out of state, better foster network. Her mouth twisted slightly. It's always better. Nolan's mind ran through what he knew about better. Better was sometimes a word people used to cover a crime. Do you have names? He asked. Tessa hesitated. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of forms, stamped and signed, all neat enough to make a person relax. They call themselves Riverlight Rescue, Tessa said. Sounds like a church choir, doesn't it? Nolan stared at the page. Riverlight. The name had the warmth of a candle, the kind you lit for hope. He hated that someone had stolen such a name to hide their hands. And you're sure? He asked. Tessa's eyes hardened. I'm sure enough to stop trusting the system that keeps delivering these animals to me in pieces, she said, then caught herself, jaw tightening as if she regretted the sharpness. Sorry, I don't mean to. You mean exactly what you mean, Nolan said. His voice stayed steady, but his chest felt tight. And you're not wrong. Tessa slid a paper toward him, a phone number, a mailing label, an invoice for bulk dog food, one brand, one distributor, always the same. It's not much, she said, but it's a thread. Nolan looked at Coda. The dog's gaze met his, calm and patient, like, thread is enough if you know how to pull. Nolan stood. I need to find where that thread goes, he said. Tessa's eyebrows lifted slightly. You're going back out there. It's daylight, Nolan said. Though they both knew daylight did not make wolves kinder. I'll be careful. Tessa leaned forward, lowering her voice. If you talk to local police, choose carefully, she said. I filed complaints before. They got lost. She swallowed. Some people don't want problems. They want quiet. Quiet. Nolan thought of Luna hanging in the wind. Quiet was what cruelty relied on. I won't be quiet, he said. The first stop was the distributor address on the invoice, a warehouse supply store across town. Nolan did not go inside like a man on a mission. He went in like a normal customer. The kind people ignored. He bought nothing. He just watched. A clerk, early 20s, lanky with acne scars and tired eyes, glanced at Nolan's boots and then at Coda. Nice dog, the clerk said, trying to sound casual. Coda, Nolan replied. The clerk nodded toward the invoice Nolan had shown him. Yeah, we deliver that brand, he said, but I can't give customer info. Policy. Nolan smiled with the smallest corner of his mouth. Not friendly, not threatening, just patient. I'm not asking for secrets, he said. I'm asking if you've ever delivered to a place near the river, old warehouse district. The clerk hesitated. Then he shrugged. The way young men shrugged when they wanted to be brave but did not know how. Lots of deliveries, he said. But yeah, there's a guy always pays fast, wears a nice coat, smells expensive. He squinted, searching memory. Crow. I think Wyatt Crow. Nolan's stomach tightened. Wyatt Crow, he repeated. The clerk nodded, then looked down, like he had just realized he might have said too much. Nolan thanked him and left without pushing further. Pressure broke people. Nolan needed them intact, willing to speak again when it mattered. By afternoon, the sky had turned a dull white, the kind that made everything look like an old photograph. Nolan drove toward the river, not to the exact warehouse from last night, but close enough to see the flow of roads, the patterns of trucks, the places cameras might hide. He found a small rescue shelter on the edge of a working-class neighborhood, a place squeezed between a laundromat and a closed-down diner. A wooden sign out front read, Shaw's Safe Haven in peeling paint. Inside, the air smelled like wet fur and bleach and hope. A woman stood behind a half door, small and wiry, with silver hair tucked under a knit cap. Her eyes were bright, sharp, amused, like she had survived too many winters to be impressed by a man in a coat. You're not here for a cat, she said before Nolan could speak. Nolan blinked. No, ma'am. She came around the counter with brisk steps. Up close, he saw her hands weathered, strong, With tiny scars from claws and work, she looked about 68. But she moved like she refused to give age any authority. "Evelyn Shaw," she said. "Evie, if you're not a liar." "Nolan Pierce," he replied. Evie's gaze dropped to Coda. "Good dog," she said. And it was not a compliment tossed lightly. It was an assessment. "He watches you like you're his job." "He is," Nolan said. Evie snorted, humor flashing. "Well, that's cheaper than therapy." Nolan almost smiled. Almost. His eyes moved around the shelter. Old blankets folded neatly. Donation bins. A wall of photos, adopted pets with families, smiling like miracles were ordinary. Evie followed his gaze. Then her face grew serious. "You didn't come here because you're feeling generous," she said. "You came because you saw something you can't unsee." Nolan's throat tightened. He thought of Luna's eyes, the way they had tried to stay open for her puppies. "Yes," he said. Evie leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. Under her quilted coat, she wore layered sweaters, practical and warm. "Tell me," she said, voice softer now. Nolan told her only what he needed to, not the whole story, just enough for her to understand the shape of it. The puppies, the tree, the name Riverlight Rescue, the invoice. When he said Wyatt Crow, Evie's humor vanished, like a light switched off. "That man," she said quietly, "loves cameras, loves ribbons, loves writing checks where people can see the ink." Her eyes narrowed. "He hosts charity galas every winter, smiles like a saint. And somehow, every time a dog goes missing from a transfer, and people shrug and say, 'Well, at least someone tried.'" Nolan felt anger rise again. But now it had direction. "Do you have proof?" he asked. Evie's mouth tightened. "I have patterns," she said. "And patterns get you in trouble if you say them too loud." Her gaze flicked to the front window. "This town has ears." Outside, a patrol car rolled past, slow. Nolan watched it without moving. Evie watched him watching. "You're thinking about calling the police," she said. Nolan did not lie. "I'm thinking about who to call," he said. Evie nodded once. "Then be careful," she said, "because some badges protect people like us, and some badges protect people like him." Coda rose quietly. Ears pricked toward the door. Nolan followed the dog's attention. The patrol car had slowed again, almost like it had nowhere else to be. Nolan's chest tightened. He had not even started pulling the thread hard, and already the room felt watched. Evie stepped closer, lowering her voice to something that sounded like a warning and a prayer. "If you're going to fight this," she said, "don't do it loud. Do it smart." Nolan looked down at Coda, then back at Evie. "I can do smart," he said. And in his mind, the image of the warehouse district returned. Not as a place, but as a map he could read, a map he could use. He left the shelter with the snow beginning again, and the city pretending to be clean. But Nolan had seen the dirt underneath, and he was done pretending with it. The man who wanted him quiet. Dusk returned with a bruised sky, and snow began again in slow, lazy flakes. The river wind carried a clean smell that felt dishonest, like the city was trying to wash itself before anyone could look too closely. Nolan Pierce parked 2 blocks away from the warehouse district and killed the engine. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was watchful. He sat for a full minute, letting his eyes adjust, letting his mind settle into the old rhythm he never fully lost. In the dim dashboard glow, his outfit looked exactly like it always did. Navy winter parka, mid-thigh length, red and black plaid flannel beneath, faded jeans, brown low-cut leather boots, nothing flashy, nothing that said hero, just a man built like he used to carry heavy things for a living, now carrying quieter weight. Coda sat in the passenger seat, black and tan coat blending into the shadows, amber-brown eyes reflecting the streetlight like coins. He was trained like a service dog, steady and silent, the kind that did not waste sound. Nolan didn't need commands. Coda read him the way weather read a field. Nolan pulled out a small notepad and drew a quick map from memory. Angles, lines of sight, the most likely camera positions, the simplest exit route if things went sideways. He thought about what Evie had said, her humor turning into steel. "Don't do it loud. Do it smart." He thought about Tessa's tired eyes, and the way her voice had tightened when she said, Paperwork could be clean while hands stayed dirty. And he thought about Luna, not the rope itself, not the tree, but the meaning behind it. Someone had wanted a mother dog to disappear without noise. Someone had assumed nobody would care enough to follow the trail. Nolan rested his palm on the steering wheel. For a moment, he felt the old instinct to charge straight in and end it fast. It was the easiest kind of courage, the kind that burned bright and died young. Then his left knee gave a quiet throb, and it grounded him. He wasn't 25 anymore. He didn't have a platoon. He didn't have backup he could trust. So he chose the other kind of courage, the slow kind. He slipped out of the truck and moved along the alley line, staying in the deepest shadows. Coda padded beside him, paws soundless on snow-dusted asphalt. Nolan's breath stayed controlled. Inhale, exhale, slow enough to think, fast enough to move if he had to. The warehouses rose ahead, blunt and dark. A single security lamp cast a sickly circle on the back lot, and beyond it, snow drifted like ash. Nolan found his observation point behind a stack of broken pallets near a fence line. From there, he could see the service entrance to the warehouse and the loading bay beyond. He stayed still, letting the scene come to him. Time moved differently when you waited. Each minute stretched, then snapped back. Nolan watched for patterns. Headlights, footsteps, doors opening. The way a place breathed when people worked inside it. Coda shifted once, ears angling toward the far side of the building. Nolan followed the direction with his eyes and saw a faint movement. A shadow passing behind a window where no light should have been. A door creaked, low, controlled. A man stepped into the circle of the lamp and pulled a cigarette from his pocket. He was young, maybe late 20s, lean with a restless posture. He wore a dark hoodie under a worn work jacket. His shoulders were hunched, like he was trying to fold himself smaller than his own choices. He lit the cigarette with shaking hands and glanced over his shoulder before taking a drag. Nolan didn't move. He didn't want to be seen. He wanted to understand. A few minutes later, a truck rolled in without flashy markings. No company logo, no pride. Just a dull white box truck that looked like it could belong to anyone. It backed into the loading bay with practiced ease. The driver stayed inside. Another man came out from the warehouse to guide it in. That man was older, broad, with a thick neck, and the kind of stance that said he enjoyed being the reason someone else looked down. Nolan's stomach tightened. The back door of the truck opened. He didn't see everything. He didn't need to. He saw the shape of stacked crates. He saw metal glint. He saw movement inside one of the crates that made his jaw lock. Not violent movement, just the desperate shifting of something alive that had been kept too long in the wrong place. Coda's body went very still. His tail did not wag. His ears stood tall. Nolan felt the dog's restraint like a hand on his chest, reminding him to breathe. Nolan lifted his phone and began recording from behind cover. No flash, no sound. He kept it steady, like he'd learned to steady a scope in wind. A second truck arrived, smaller, darker. It didn't go to the loading bay. It parked farther off, near the trees behind the warehouse. The same trees. Nolan's throat tightened. He thought of the branch, the rope, the way the snow had tried to hide it all. He lowered his phone. His mind ran through options. If he stayed, he got more evidence. If he moved, he might save whatever was in those crates. He chose the priority that had kept Luna alive. Life first, evidence second. He signaled Coda with the smallest gesture, a shift of fingers by his thigh. Coda understood instantly and moved with him toward the darker side of the building, staying low, silent, present. They rounded the corner and found a narrow gap between two storage sheds. The snow was deeper here, muffling sound. Nolan's left knee protested, but he ignored it. Pain was data, not a command. He reached the edge of the loading bay and paused, listening. Voices. Two men. Close enough to hear, but not close enough to see clearly. Crow wants it done clean, one said, annoyed. Clean, the other muttered with a short laugh. Yeah, like last time. Nolan felt something cold in his chest. Wyatt Crow. The name made the night feel smaller. He could have pushed forward. He could have made it physical, ended it in seconds. But he remembered Tessa's warning, remembered Evie's quiet fear. remembered that if he became the story, Crow would win. So Nolan did what he did best. He controlled the space. He slid behind a stack of crates near the bay door and found a latch that wasn't fully secured. Inside, he saw a smaller holding area, and behind it, a line of kennels, not all occupied, some empty, some with the unmistakable shape of animals pressed into corners. Coda's eyes fixed on the nearest kennel. Nolan read the look like words. There are more. Nolan worked quickly, gently, without sudden movements. He opened the latch just enough to create a gap and called softly, not with his voice, but with a low click of his tongue. The sound was small. It carried only a few feet. A dog shifted inside, a quiet whine. Nolan reached in and unclipped a simple hook holding the kennel door, then eased it open. One dog slipped out, trembling, keeping low. Another followed, thinner, eyes wide, body ready to bolt. Nolan guided them into the shadowed gap behind the shed, where the wind was softer. He moved like he was handling fragile glass. That was when a voice cut across the bay. "Well, look at that." Nolan froze. A man stepped into the edge of the light. Medium height, a little heavy around the middle. Face friendly in the way some people used friendliness like a weapon. Close-cropped hair, a sheriff's jacket zipped up tight against the cold. A radio on his shoulder. Deputy Travis Kane. He smiled like he was meeting Nolan for coffee, not catching him near a warehouse full of cages. "Kinda late for a walk," Kane said. Nolan kept his hands visible, kept his tone level. "Same could be said for you." Kane's smile widened slightly, but his eyes stayed flat. "Got a call about suspicious activity," he said. "Figured I'd check it out." Nolan didn't believe him for a second. Not the timing, not the calm, not the way Kane's gaze flicked past Nolan, not to Coda, but to the gap behind the shed. He was counting. He was already building a story. Coda stood beside Nolan, silent, steady, a service dog that looked like a judge. Kane tilted his head. "That your dog?" he asked. "Coda," Nolan replied. Kane chuckled softly. "Nice." His voice dropped a little, like they were sharing a secret. "Tell me something. Nolan Pierce, what exactly do you think you're doing back here?" Nolan felt the night tighten around him. The snow kept falling, soft and innocent. While the world underneath sharpened into a blade, he realized, with sudden clarity, that the warehouse wasn't the only trap. The badge was part of it, and Kane wanted him to make the first loud mistake. "Don't be quiet." Snow eased into a thin, drifting veil, and the river wind softened for the first time in days. Buffalo looked almost gentle at dawn, like the city itself was holding its breath to see what Nolan would do next. Nolan Pierce did not sleep. He sat in his truck a few streets away from the warehouse district, hands steady on the wheel, heart steady in the way it got when the mission became simple. Tell the truth. Protect the weak. Do it clean. His navy winter parka was still on, still familiar. The red and black plaid flannel showed at the collar and cuffs. Faded jeans. Brown, low-cut leather boots. The same outfit he wore when he wanted the world to stop guessing who he was. A man who did not perform courage. A man who practiced it. Coda sat beside him, calm. Black and tan coat neat even after a long night. Amber-brown eyes alert, trained as a service dog. He was the sort that did not bark to prove a point. He listened, watched, and moved only when it mattered. Nolan trusted that kind of discipline more than he trusted promises. After Deputy Travis Kane had stepped into the light and tried to make Nolan the problem, Nolan had done the one thing Kane could not control. He had not swung. He had not shouted. He had not given the night a headline. He had backed away with the same restraint that had kept Luna alive, gathered the animals he had freed, and disappeared into the dark before Kane could write the ending for him. Now Nolan held the ending in a different form. Video, dates, patterns, copies of forms Tessa had kept, a clean chain of small truths that, together, became something too heavy to deny. He drove straight to Morgan Animal Care. Tessa Morgan opened the clinic door before he could knock twice. In the morning light, her brown hair was still pinned up, her scrubs still wrinkled, her eyes still tired, but there was a new tightness in her posture, like she had decided she was done being scared. "You're alive," she said, half relief, half warning. Nolan nodded. I didn't give him what he wanted. Tessa's gaze flicked to Coda, then back to Nolan. Good. Inside. The clinic felt warmer than it had any right to, considering how little sleep lived there. Luna lay on thick blankets in a quiet room. Her eyes were open now, dark and intelligent, still guarded but no longer empty. Ash and Ember were pressed against her side, tiny bodies rising and falling in steady breaths. When Nolan stepped closer, Ember lifted her head and stared at him like she was taking attendance. Nolan crouched, careful with his left knee. You did good, he whispered, unsure whether he meant the puppy, the mother, or himself. A soft sound came from Ash, something between a sigh and a complaint, like the world had kept him waiting too long. Nolan almost smiled. Tessa watched him for a beat. So what now? She asked. Nolan reached into his coat and laid a small stack of papers on the counter, along with his phone. Now we don't hand this to the wrong door, he said. He had already made the call. Not to the county, not to anyone who shared coffee with Kane. He had used a number Evie had quietly given him, scribbled on the back of a shelter flyer, with the kind of handwriting that said, I don't trust phones either. An hour later, a woman walked into the clinic with a winter coat dusted in snow and a posture that did not bend for small-town pressure. She was about 38, average height, athletic build, hair pulled back tight, face calm and unreadable. Her eyes scanned the room the way Nolan's did, not curious, just collecting facts. When she held out her ID, she did it without drama. Agent Mariah Kent, she said. Her voice was even. State Task Force. Tessa exhaled like she had been holding air in her lungs for a year. Nolan kept his tone respectful and direct. I have video from the warehouse district, he said, and paperwork tied to a front called Riverlight Rescue. The name Wyatt Crow came up more than once. I also have a deputy who showed up at the exact wrong time. Mariah's expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened slightly. Deputy Travis Kane, she said, as if confirming a piece that already fit. Nolan felt a cold clarity settle in him. You know him. I know the pattern, Mariah replied. She turned her gaze to Tessa, and I know what it costs when people stay quiet. That word again, quiet. Nolan looked down at Coda. The dog's ears were up, but he was still ready, not reactive. Nolan handed over everything, every file, every clip, every note. He made sure Mariah saw the details that mattered. The loading bay, the unmarked truck, the crates, the way men moved like they had done it 100 times. He did not embellish. He did not need to. Mariah watched the video once, then a second time. When she finished, she nodded once. Small and final. We moved today, she said. By late afternoon, the warehouse district was no longer quiet. Nolan did not go in with the team. He didn't need the spotlight, and he didn't need to risk turning the operation into a personal feud. He stayed at a distance with Coda, watching the line of unmarked vehicles, watching the controlled speed of people who were trained to end bad things without turning them into chaos. Snow fell again, light and harmless looking. While officers moved with purpose, Wyatt Crow arrived like a man who believed the world would part for him. Tall, well-fed, expensive coat, leather gloves, hair perfect, even in winter wind. He looked like a billboard for respectability. When Mariah intercepted him near the entrance, Crow smiled like he was greeting donors. There must be some mistake, he said, voice smooth, practiced. I run a charity operation. We help animals. Mariah didn't argue. She simply held up a paper and let the law speak. Crow's smile tightened, then returned, bright and false. His eyes flicked to Nolan in the distance, like he had already guessed who had lit the fuse. Crow called out, not shouting, but projecting, the way rich men did when they wanted a room to become theirs. Sir, Crow said, voice warm as syrup. If you have concerns, we can talk privately. I can make things right. Donations, medical bills, anything you need. Nolan stepped forward just enough to be heard. Navy parka, red and black flannel, boots planted in snow, Coda at heel, still and silent. Nolan's voice stayed calm. You can't buy quiet from me, he said. Crow's eyes hardened for the first time. You don't know what you're doing, he hissed. Nolan thought of Luna, hanging in the wind, of Ash and Ember, tugging at his coat like tiny hands, of Tessa's file drawer full of neat lies, of Evie's shelter photos, each one a small victory. I know exactly what I'm doing. Nolan replied, I'm ending it. Behind Crow, another vehicle arrived. Deputy Travis Kane stepped out, face tight, smile gone. He looked at the scene like a man watching a door close. Mariah's team moved quickly after that. Quiet, efficient, final. When it was over, Nolan returned to the clinic. Luna watched him from her blankets. She did not wag a tail. She didn't have to. She simply blinked slowly. And Nolan felt something in his chest loosen, like a knot finally giving up. A week later, Evie held a small adoption event at Shaw's Safe Haven. The shelter smelled like fresh laundry and dog treats and a kind of hope that didn't need a slogan. Evie, silver hair tucked under a knit cap, pointed at Nolan with a teasing glare. Don't think you can walk in here and leave empty-handed, she said. Nolan glanced down. Ash was gnawing gently on the lace of Nolan's boot like it was a contract. Ember sat beside Coda, leaning into his shoulder, as if he'd always been family. Nolan shook his head once, a quiet surrender. Fine, he murmured, and there was a hint of humor in his voice for the first time in a while. But I'm not naming him something dramatic. Evie laughed. Sure, tell yourself that. Nolan signed the papers, not because he wanted to be saved by a dog, but because he finally understood something he had ignored for too long. Love wasn't loud. Love was what showed up in the snow. Sometimes a miracle does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes as two trembling puppies in the snow, pulling at the hem of a stranger's coat, refusing to let their mother suffer in silence. In a world that often feels rushed and loud, that kind of small, stubborn love can only be one thing. A reminder that God still places the right souls in the right place at the right time. Nolan did not plan to become part of anyone's rescue story. He simply chose not to look away. And maybe that is how faith shows up in real life. Not only in churches, but in parking lots, on cold streets. In the moment a person decides, I will do what is right, even if no one is watching. Every day, we face tiny crossroads like that. A neighbor who needs help, but is too proud to ask. A lonely person who just wants to be seen. An animal that cannot speak, waiting for someone to listen with their heart. If God can use a winter storm and two little puppies to lead a man to the truth, then he can use any ordinary day to wake up the best parts of us. 2. The question is not whether miracles exist. The question is whether we will notice them and whether we will answer when they call. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs hope today. And I would love to hear from you. Comment below. Have you ever seen a small miracle show up at the exact right moment? Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-the-heart stories of love, courage, and second chances. May God bless you and your family, keep you safe, and fill your days with quiet miracles.